A black girl kicked out of car dealership. Next day, her billionaire father's Rolls-Royce arrives. Hello everyone. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to hear more meaningful stories. Alexis Johnson walked into the luxury car dealership. Her school uniform a stark contrast to the polished opulence that surrounded her. The gleaming Lamborghini Aventador SVJ Roadster stood like a masterpiece at the center of the showroom. Its sleek red curves and sharp edges catching the light, promising an experience of power and prestige. Her eyes, full of awe, scanned the vehicle as she took in the intricate details, a faint smile tugging at her lips. This wasn't just any car to her, it was a dream, a gift she envisioned for her father's upcoming 50th birthday. As Alexis stood there, lost in admiration, Blake Harris, the dealership's sales manager, eyed her from across the room. His gaze flicked over her from head to toe, dismissing her almost instantly. She wasn't dressed in designer clothes, nor did she have the air of someone who could afford a car like that. In his eyes, she was just another girl, out of place, wandering where she didn't belong. Without missing a beat, Blake sauntered over, his expression icy. "Excuse me," he sneered, pointing toward the exit. "I believe you've wandered into the wrong place. These cars are for serious customers, not for people window shopping." His tone was thick with condescension, as if her very presence was an inconvenience. A few employees snickered quietly, and nearby customers shot curious glances her way, their eyes drifting over her plain appearance. Alexis could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, the sting of humiliation sharp and immediate. Yet, she didn't flinch. She didn't allow herself to crumble under the weight of their judgment. With her head held high, she turned and walked toward the door without uttering a word, her back straight and her resolve unshaken. Every step felt like a battle. But she knew one thing for sure, she wasn't going to let anyone define her worth. The next morning, the rumble of a powerful engine cut through the stillness of the street, reverberating against the walls of Boston's most prestigious avenue. The sun bathed the scene in golden light, casting the showroom windows of Boston luxury motors in a breathtaking sheen, their pristine surfaces reflecting the promises of wealth and luxury within. Customers stood mesmerized by the exotic cars glistening inside: Ferrari, Bentley, Porsche, and of course, Lamborghini, each one more magnificent than the last. The air was thick with the hum of conversation, the buzz of those who had the means to buy their dreams. But amidst the grandeur, a lone figure stepped into the showroom. It was Alexis Johnson, her school uniform looking out of place against the opulence that surrounded her. Her curly hair framed her face, eyes wide with both wonder and determination as she surveyed the glittering lineup of cars. Her sneakers, worn down by months of use, scuffed softly against the floor as she walked further in, her posture unwavering despite the judgmental stares that followed her. Sales associates, dressed impeccably in their suits, turned their heads in unison, their eyes lingering on the girl who seemed so out of place. Blake Harris, ever the epitome of judgment and arrogance, couldn't help but notice her. He approached, his eyes narrowing as he assessed her with practiced disdain. In his mind, she was nothing more than a curiosity, a kid seeking Instagram pictures. Perhaps, but certainly not a serious customer. A black teenage girl, dressed plainly, walking into a showroom that catered only to the elite. His smile was mockingly polite, a thin veil for the scorn beneath. "Can I help you with something?" he asked, his tone dripping with insincerity. Alexis, sensing the underlying ridicule, took a slow breath, her confidence unbroken. She looked him square in the eye, her voice calm but firm. "Yes, I'm interested in the Lamborghini Aventador SVJ Roadster. I'd like more information about it." The words left her mouth like a challenge, her determination pushing through the thick atmosphere of disbelief that surrounded her. Blake, taken aback for only a moment, quickly regained his composure. His gaze flicked to her appearance again, a derisive laugh escaping his lips. "Do you realize how much this car costs?" he asked, as though she couldn't possibly understand. "This is a limited edition. Not exactly something anyone can just afford. Especially not someone like you." The laughter from the nearby employees and the skeptical glances from the customers grew louder, their amusement at her expense ringing in the air. But Alexis didn't flinch. She met their mockery with quiet resolve, her gaze unwavering. She wasn't just here for a car. She was here to prove something, to herself and to everyone watching. With a steady breath, she replied, "I understand the price, but I'm still interested, and I'd like to know more about it." The room seemed to freeze for a moment, the weight of her words settling over the space like a storm about to break. Blake's eyes flickered with a mix of frustration and confusion. He could feel the tension in the air. She wasn't the girl he'd assumed she was. But that didn't matter. In his world, people like Alexis didn't belong. His voice dropped, colder now, as he dismissively told her, "This car isn't available to you." But Alexis stood firm, her composure never wavering. She had come here for a reason, and no amount of prejudice would drive her away. She knew that her worth wasn't defined by her appearance or the way others saw her. It was defined by her actions, and she was determined to make them count. The confrontation had only just begun. The tension in the showroom thickened as Blake Harris's disdain for Alexis Johnson grew more apparent. He had already dismissed her once, and now the young girl stood her ground. Undeterred by the insults that hung in the air, Blake's arrogance swelled, and with a cold smirk, he took a deliberate step toward her, as if to remind her of her place. But the subtle mockery in his voice only seemed to sharpen Alexis's resolve. "I'm afraid this car is reserved for serious buyers," he said, his words dripping with a veiled threat. His eyes narrowed, and he glanced around the showroom, ensuring that everyone was watching, their gaze fixed on the unfolding spectacle. A few of the wealthy customers chuckled, enjoying the spectacle of a girl clearly out of her depth. Yet Alexis stood, her back straight and her chin raised high. The sting of their judgment threatened to overpower her. But her father's lessons echoed in her mind, lessons of dignity, of fighting against injustice with grace. Not anger. The weight of their mockery pressed in on her, but she refused to buckle under it. With quiet strength, she replied, her voice calm and unwavering, "I understand, but I'm still interested. I'd like more information about the Lamborghini." Blake hesitated for a fraction of a second, taken aback by the unyielding confidence in her tone. He couldn't fathom it. How could this girl, so plainly dressed, stand before him with such calm and poise, as though her very presence in the showroom was her right? His irritation only grew. He was the master of this world, the one who decided who belonged and who didn't. And yet, here she was, silently challenging him in front of everyone. The showroom fell into an eerie quiet. Every eye was on Alexis, watching, waiting for her to crack. Blake saw an opportunity to reassert his control. His lips curled into a cold smirk as he tilted his head slightly, his voice low and mocking. "This car isn't something just anyone can afford. I suggest you reconsider." The words hung in the air, sharp and venomous. But Alexis did not waver. She wasn't here to argue about her financial status or to prove her worth to anyone. She simply asked, "Can you tell me about the car, Mr. Harris? Its features, customization options, and delivery time?" Her tone was polite, yet firm, and it seemed to cut through the tension like a knife. For a moment, Blake's composure faltered. The girl's unwavering determination had taken him by surprise. The laughter from the customers around him began to die down, replaced by a sharp silence. Blake, unable to contain his disdain, let out a soft chuckle, trying to regain control of the situation. "I don't think you fully understand what this car represents," he sneered. "It's a symbol of power, wealth, and exclusivity. People like you don't belong here." But Alexis, undeterred, met his gaze with a quiet intensity. She wasn't going to let him define her worth. She wasn't here for validation or approval. She was here because she knew exactly what she wanted. "I'm not interested in symbols or status," she said, her voice steady and resolute. "I'm here to learn about the car. Please, show me the details." Blake, his face reddening with frustration, opened his mouth to retort. But before he could, the showroom door swung open. A new presence filled the space, a young, nervous sales associate named Daniel Clark. He approached cautiously, sensing the rising tension. His warm, genuine smile cut through the cold atmosphere like a breath of fresh air. "Hi, I'm Daniel," he said softly, addressing Alexis. "I overheard you asking about the Lamborghini. Can I help you with the details?" Blake's eyes flashed with irritation as he shot Daniel a look that could freeze a man in his tracks. But Daniel, unfazed, offered a sincere nod to Alexis, silently inviting her to continue her inquiry. Blake could feel the balance of power slipping away, and though he tried to maintain his composure, Alexis felt an undeniable shift in the air. For the first time since entering the showroom, she felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, the tide was turning. Blake Harris stood frozen, the weight of his arrogance crashing down on him like a wave as Alexis Johnson's calm, unwavering presence lingered in the air. The soft murmurs of the showroom seemed to vanish as the spotlight shifted to the young girl who had been dismissed, ridiculed, and yet remained unbroken. He had thought she would crumble, had believed his words, his authority, would send her scurrying for the door. But instead, she stood tall, unflinching, her gaze piercing through the mockery with quiet strength. In that moment, Alexis felt the full force of the scrutiny pressing down on her, every pair of eyes in the room trained on her, waiting for her to falter. But instead of retreating, she drew in a deep breath, the weight of the judgment transforming into a fire that only strengthened her resolve. She had endured far worse than this. She had seen her father, Marcus Johnson, face his own battles with dignity and grace, never backing down, never letting others define his worth. And today, she would do the same, with a calm that was almost unsettling in the face of Blake's venom. Alexis addressed him once more, her voice measured but unyielding. "I didn't come here to be humiliated or mocked," she said, her eyes steady on his. "I came here because I'm genuinely interested in purchasing this car. For my father." Her words were deliberate, firm, and Blake, for the first time, felt a flicker of unease. This wasn't just some naive girl looking to dream about luxury. This was someone who knew what she wanted and wasn't afraid to claim it. Blake's face tightened, his earlier smugness dissolving into a mask of disbelief. His gaze swept over her once more, a glance that tried to strip her down to nothing. But Alexis remained resolute, unshaken by the cold, dismissive scrutiny. She had nothing to prove, and yet everything to show. Blake, still reeling from her defiance, tried to regain his footing. He forced a smile, his voice tinged with mockery as he tried to remind her of her place in his world. "Do you understand what you're asking for?" he sneered, the words dripping with disdain. "This is a car that costs more than most people make in a lifetime. It's not something that just anyone can buy. And certainly not someone like you." The air seemed to grow heavier as the room's attention focused solely on Alexis. She could feel the heat of their gaze, their judgment, but she refused to let it consume her. Her father had taught her to rise above it, to let the shallow opinions of others wash over her without leaving a mark. This moment wasn't about the Lamborghini. It was about showing them all that their narrow views didn't matter. "I understand perfectly, Mr. Harris," Alexis replied, her voice unwavering. "But I'm still here, still asking, and I have every right to know everything about this car. My father deserves this gift. It's not about the price. It's about the meaning behind it." Blake was momentarily speechless, the force of her words knocking him off balance. His mind raced, trying to formulate a response. But before he could, Daniel Clark, the young sales associate who had quietly observed the interaction, stepped forward. His presence was a breath of fresh air in the tension-filled room. He was genuine, warm, and unfazed by the charged atmosphere. "Ms. Johnson," Daniel said softly, addressing Alexis with a sincerity Blake could not match, "I'd be happy to show you the details of the Lamborghini. We take all customers seriously here, regardless of appearance." Blake's irritation flared at Daniel's interference. But Alexis, feeling a flicker of hope, turned toward him. Daniel's calm demeanor was like a quiet rebellion against the sharp, mocking tone of Blake. As the two began discussing the car, Alexis felt the weight of the room's judgment begin to shift. It wasn't just a car she was after, it was the chance to show them all that worth isn't measured by appearances or status. And for the first time, she felt the tiniest shift in the balance of power, a glimmer of possibility that her quiet fight had just begun. The next day, Blake Harris arrived at Boston Luxury Motors feeling a sense of victory, his mind still savoring the satisfaction of having put Alexis Johnson in her place. He thought the incident was over, a fleeting moment of humiliation for the girl. Nothing more. Yet, as the morning light filtered through the showroom windows, casting a warm glow over the rows of luxury cars, Blake couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. He pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the flurry of activity in the showroom. But just as he settled into his routine, a powerful sound echoed down the street, low, throaty, the unmistakable growl of an engine that made everyone pause. Blake's heart skipped a beat as he turned toward the sound, his eyes widening when a sleek, Black Rolls-Royce Phantom slowly glided to a stop in front of the dealership. The car was a work of art, its polished surface gleaming in the sunlight, a silent testament to wealth and power. Blake's anticipation grew as the door of the Rolls-Royce opened, and out stepped a figure with quiet authority. Marcus Johnson. The moment Marcus set foot on the ground, the atmosphere in the showroom shifted, people straightened. Murmurs of awe and recognition filled the air. Blake's confident facade began to crack. This wasn't just another wealthy customer. Marcus Johnson was a tech mogul, a billionaire with a reputation for brilliance and humility. Blake, caught off guard, stood rooted to the spot as Marcus strode toward the entrance. Richard Miller, the dealership owner, quickly followed, his face lighting up with excitement. He slapped Blake on the back, his voice filled with enthusiasm. "Blake, this is the big one. We've got a VIP today. Let's make this right." Blake nodded stiffly, adjusting his tie, the weight of the moment settling heavily on his shoulders. But nothing could have prepared him for what was to come. Marcus entered the showroom, his gaze sharp and calculating. He surveyed the space with an air of quiet command, as though he owned every inch of the room. Blake moved forward, his smile stiff and polite, trying to mask the discomfort gnawing at him. "Good morning, Mr. Johnson. Welcome to Boston Luxury Motors. It's an honor to have you with us today." His voice was smooth, practiced, but it didn't reach the depths of sincerity. Marcus turned to face him, his expression unreadable. "I'm here to discuss something important," he said, his voice deep and unwavering. "Yesterday, my daughter came here. She wasn't treated with the respect she deserves." The words hit Blake like a punch to the gut. For a moment, his mind went blank, and he felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. Marcus's eyes bored into him, his voice cold as he continued. "The way she was treated by you and your staff, dismissed, mocked, humiliated, was unacceptable." Blake's pulse quickened, his stomach twisting into knots. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. The realization that Marcus's daughter was none other than Alexis Johnson, the girl he had so carelessly dismissed, crashed over him. His smugness from the previous day evaporated into thin air, leaving behind only shame and regret. "Do you understand what you've done?" Marcus's voice was low but laced with authority, a quiet fury simmering beneath the surface. "You've not only insulted my daughter, but you've also shown a complete lack of respect for someone who has every right to be here. You've shown me and everyone else exactly who you are." Blake, his mind reeling, struggled to find words. I didn't know," he stammered, his face flushing with embarrassment. "I didn't realize." Marcus cut him off, his eyes hard as steel. "That's the problem, Blake. You didn't realize. You didn't take the time to see beyond your own prejudice. And now, you've made a mistake you can't undo." The showroom was silent, every eye now on Blake, watching as the foundation of his arrogance crumbled. Richard Miller, standing by, looked between Marcus and Blake, his face a mixture of concern and disbelief. "I'm not here to buy a car today," Marcus continued, his voice steady but laced with a quiet intensity. "I'm here to make sure this kind of treatment never happens again. Not just to my daughter, but to anyone." Blake stood frozen, the weight of his actions crashing down on him. Marcus's words echoed in his mind, each one driving home the harsh truth of his prejudice and arrogance. And as he stood there, helpless, Marcus turned and walked deeper into the showroom, leaving Blake to grapple with the consequences of his own actions. The damage was done, and now, Blake would have to face the reality of what his behavior had cost him, and what it would continue to cost him moving forward. The weeks that followed felt like an eternity to Blake Harris. The sharp sting of Marcus Johnson's words still echoed in his ears, each one reminding him of the depths of his arrogance. Every day at Boston Luxury Motors was a constant reminder of his failure, and the weight of guilt grew heavier with each passing hour. He had once prided himself on his ability to read people, to size them up in an instant. But Alexis Johnson, with her quiet confidence and unwavering dignity, had shattered that illusion. Now, every glance from his colleagues, every murmur of disapproval from the customers, felt like a silent judgment. Despite the shame that weighed on him, Blake's resolve didn't break immediately. He tried to convince himself that Marcus Johnson's rebuke, though harsh, had been undeserved, but deep down, he knew the truth: he had been wrong. And the more he tried to push it away, the more it gnawed at him, an ever-present reminder of his failure to see beyond surface appearances. One evening, as he sat in his office, trying to drown out the heavy silence that filled the dealership, he received a message. It was from Alexis. The words were simple, but they struck him like a bolt of lightning. "I accept your apology." At first, Blake stared at the message, his fingers frozen over the keyboard. He had hoped, in some small corner of his mind, that perhaps she would remain angry, that she would never forgive him. But as he read her words again, something within him shifted. He realized that Alexis, this young girl who had shown him the strength to stand tall in the face of ridicule, had given him something he never thought he'd receive, a second chance. The next day, he arrived at the Carter Foundation, where he had been volunteering as part of his punishment for his actions. Blake had been resentful at first, his pride bruised and his heart hardened against the humbling work he had been forced into. But as the days went by, he found something that startled him. He began to feel something real. The children at the center, despite their hardships, exuded a warmth and joy that Blake hadn't seen in years. They had a sense of purpose, a resilience that he had long forgotten in his pursuit of luxury and status. Thomas, the young boy with the battered backpack, had become a symbol of that change. Blake had been moved by the boy's quiet strength, the way he never complained, no matter how tough life was. Thomas had taught him more about humility in one conversation than Blake had learned in his entire career. It was through these children, these innocent lives untouched by prejudice, that Blake began to see the truth of what Marcus had said. Dignity wasn't about money, power, or appearance. It was about how one treated others, especially in the face of adversity. One afternoon, as Blake helped the children with their homework, Thomas approached him again, this time with a bright, hopeful smile. "Do you want to play basketball with us, Uncle Blake?" the boy asked, his eyes wide with excitement. Blake, who had always turned down such offers with a dismissive wave, found himself pausing. For the first time in a long while, he felt a spark of something, genuine connection. Without a word, Blake stood up and followed Thomas outside. Stepping onto the cracked pavement where the children were gathered, he felt the weight of his old arrogance melt away as he picked up a basketball and joined the game. The joy in their laughter, the way they cheered him on, was a balm to the wounds he had carried for so long. For the first time, he wasn't Blake Harris, the high-powered salesman. He was just another person, playing for the pure joy of it. As the game continued, Blake realized that the transformation he had been avoiding had already begun. He wasn't the man he once was, driven by pride and a sense of superiority. He was someone new, someone who could look at the world with clearer eyes, unclouded by prejudice and arrogance. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the playground, Blake felt a deep sense of peace, a peace that had eluded him for far too long. Blake's transformation reached its climax during the annual charity gala hosted by Marcus Johnson. The grand hall sparkled with opulence, but Blake's mind was elsewhere, filled with a quiet unease. As he stood by the bar, he caught sight of Marcus and Alexis, surrounded by guests, their easy smiles radiating a warmth he had never known. Then, a voice broke through his thoughts. It was Marcus, addressing the crowd. "This evening is not about wealth," he said, his voice carrying with authority, "but about respect. The true worth of a person is measured not by their money or appearance, but by their dignity and how they treat others." Blake stood still, the weight of Marcus's words sinking deep into him. He had been blind to this truth for so long. The shame of his past actions hit him like a wave, but instead of retreating, he stood taller. The realization struck him. He was no longer the man who had belittled Alexis. He was someone new, someone committed to making a difference, to proving that compassion was the true measure of success. Marcus's gaze met his across the room, a silent nod of approval. In that moment, Blake knew he had not only found redemption but also a renewed purpose, to live with integrity, humility, and respect. Blake stood in the showroom, a quiet satisfaction settling within him. The transformation at Boston Luxury Motors was undeniable. Gone were the days of judgment and prejudice, replaced by a culture of respect and equality. He had worked tirelessly to foster this change, his own journey reflected in the new atmosphere of the dealership. When Marcus Johnson walked in, the warmth and sincerity in his smile spoke volumes. "You've made something real here, Blake," he said, his voice filled with pride. Blake nodded, his heart swelling with a sense of accomplishment. He had done more than repair his reputation, he had built something lasting. As Marcus left, Blake felt the weight of his old self dissolve entirely, replaced by a man who had learned the true value of humility and respect. The journey was far from over, but Blake knew he was finally on the right path.